I never thought my own brother could destroy everything I loved, but then he went and did the unthinkable. He got my wife pregnant. Stick with me while I share my story. And if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Ethan Collins. I've always been hardworking, focused on building a stable life for myself and my wife, Madison. She's kind, loving, and the kind of person who can light up any room. Our life together felt perfect, at least until Derek, my younger brother, started showing his true colors. Derek was always charming, the type of person everyone liked, but beneath that charm was a deep jealousy of me. He constantly found ways to undermine me, making small comments about my career, questioning my choices, and even giving Madison advice that seemed harmless at first, but was really meant to create doubt and distance between us. At family gatherings, he would casually belittle my achievements or make jokes at my expense. I ignored it for a long time, thinking he was just being playful, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Madison noticed too. She would sometimes glance at me with concern when Derek made these remarks, but she trusted my judgment and didn't want to make a scene. Still, the tension was growing, and I felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells around him. I tried talking to Derek about it, but he would always laugh it off, acting like I was overreacting. It was frustrating because I loved my brother and wanted to believe he had good intentions, but deep down, I knew he was jealous of the life I had built with Madison. I couldn't understand why he couldn't be happy for me, why he had to insert himself into our lives in such a toxic way. Little did I know, his envy would soon turn into something much darker. Every subtle insult, every underhanded comment, was just the beginning of the storm that was about to hit my life. I always believed family was a safe place, but Derek proved that blood ties don't guarantee loyalty. I thought I knew my brother, but I was about to learn that some people are capable of betraying the ones they claim to love the most. The life Madison and I had worked so hard to build was about to be shattered in ways I never imagined, and the person I trusted the most outside of her was the one who would bring the most pain. Ethan started noticing that Derek's behavior was becoming harder to ignore. What once seemed like harmless teasing now felt like constant jabs. Derek would casually ask to borrow money, always promising to pay it back, but it never happened. Along with that, he would drop comments about Ethan's decisions, questioning his career path or the way he handled his responsibilities, making Ethan doubt himself more than once. Madison could see the change in him. She tried to calm him down when he came home frustrated, reminding him that Derek might not mean any real harm, but Ethan felt the tension building inside. Despite all the warning signs, he wanted to believe in his brother, holding on to trust that now seemed almost naive. Every interaction left a sour feeling, yet Ethan convinced himself it was just a phase, not realizing that Derek was slowly testing boundaries and planting seeds that would later grow into something far worse. The frustration and unease began to settle in his chest like a constant weight, making every conversation with Derek a careful negotiation. He started noticing the subtle ways Derek tried to manipulate situations, but still, he hesitated to confront him directly, hoping it was temporary. Meanwhile, Madison watched both of them, feeling torn between keeping peace and protecting her husband from the mounting tension that seemed inevitable. Ethan's faith in his brother's intentions blinded him to just how far Derek was willing to push, and he didn't realize how the cracks in their family's foundation were widening with every passing day. While Ethan spent long hours at work trying to provide for Madison and their future, Derek quietly began inserting himself into their lives in ways Ethan didn't notice. He would show up just to check on Madison after small disagreements, offering sympathy and making her feel understood in ways Ethan hadn't in that moment. Slowly, Derek's words began to create tiny cracks in Madison's trust, planting questions about whether Ethan truly prioritized her and their marriage. She started hesitating when making decisions, sometimes looking to Derek for reassurance instead of Ethan, though she didn't fully realize why. Ethan sensed a subtle shift in their connection, an unspoken distance he couldn't explain, and a feeling that someone else had started influencing her thoughts and emotions. The warmth and closeness they once shared began to feel strained. Nights he returned home exhausted, hoping for comfort, he found Madison distracted, distant, or unusually preoccupied. Small conversations that once brought them together now left him uneasy, with the nagging suspicion that his absence at work had given Derek an opening. Each interaction between Madison and Derek seemed innocent on the surface, but Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that his brother was crossing invisible lines. The emotional tension grew quietly but steadily, filling the spaces between him and Madison with uncertainty and mistrust he didn't know how to bridge. By the time he realized the influence Derek had begun to hold, the bond he had relied on with Madison already felt thinner, fragile, and threatened in a way Ethan hadn't anticipated. One evening, Ethan returned home earlier than usual and heard voices coming from the living room. As he approached quietly, he realized it was Derek and Madison talking in hushed tone. Their words were not casual. They hinted at plans and feelings that Ethan could hardly process. He froze, unable to believe what he was hearing. The realization hit him like a punch. His own brother, the person he trusted more than anyone, had been crossing boundaries he never imagined possible. Ethan's mind raced, struggling to reconcile the image of Derek he had grown up with and the betrayal he was now witnessing. When Madison noticed him standing there, her face went pale. Ethan tried to speak calmly, carefully choosing words to test her honesty, but she quickly denied anything was happening, insisting he had misunderstood. Her denial only made the situation more unbearable. Inside, Ethan felt a storm of emotions: anger, confusion, heartbreak, and disbelief, all mixed together until he didn't know how to think clearly. He wanted to lash out, to demand the truth, but part of him feared the reality even more than her words. Every memory of Derek's charm and their shared past clashed violently with the hurt and humiliation he now felt. The house, once a safe place for him and Madison, suddenly seemed suffocating, filled with whispers of betrayal and deceit. Ethan couldn't sleep that night. Images of the conversation haunted him, replaying over and over, each time with more clarity and more pain. The sense of being powerless weighed heavily on him, knowing that the person who should have been his ally had become the source of his deepest wound. Every glance at Madison now carried uncertainty, and every interaction with Derek seemed charged with hidden intentions. Ethan felt trapped between confronting the reality he had overheard and preserving the life he had worked so hard to build. The emotional turmoil consumed him, leaving a raw ache in his chest, as the betrayal of blood and trust collided in ways he never expected. For the first time, he realized that some wounds weren't just about lies or arguments. They were about the people who should have stood by you, but instead chose to destroy the very foundation of your life. Ethan's life came crashing down the day he stumbled upon undeniable proof of the betrayal he had only feared before. While organizing some papers in their home office, he found medical documents hidden in a drawer, along with messages between Derek and Madison that left no room for doubt. The words on the screen confirmed the worst. Madison was carrying Derek's child. The revelation hit Ethan like a physical blow. He felt as if the ground had vanished beneath him, leaving nothing but emptiness and disbelief. Every plan he had made for the future, every dream he had shared with Madison, felt shattered in an instant. The man he had trusted the most, his own brother, walked into his life with calculated charm, knowing exactly how to manipulate him and break his heart. When Ethan confronted Derek later, hoping for even a shred of remorse, Derek only laughed, a cold, cutting sound that pierced Ethan's chest. He mocked Ethan's blind faith, his belief in family, and the life he thought was secure. Derek spoke of his success in getting what he wanted, as if Ethan's pain was a joke to him. Madison, torn and conflicted, said little, her silence making the betrayal even more unbearable. Ethan felt powerless, trapped in a reality he could barely comprehend. The sense of being completely blindsided was suffocating. He could hardly reconcile the brother he grew up with and the person who had intentionally destroyed his marriage from the inside. Nights became unbearable as Ethan replayed every moment, wondering when Derek had decided to cross the line and why Madison had let it happen. Anger, sorrow, and humiliation combined into a heavy weight pressing down on him, leaving him questioning everything he thought he knew about trust, love, and family. The home that once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a cage filled with deceit, and Ethan realized that some betrayals aren't just mistakes. They are deliberate acts that leave scars deeper than anyone can see. Every glance at Derek, every memory of his charm, now felt poisoned by betrayal, and Ethan knew nothing would ever feel the same again. Ethan withdrew completely from everyone who had once been part of his life. Friends' calls went unanswered, family invitations ignored, as if by retreating he could shield himself from the relentless ache inside. Every thought returned to the betrayal, looping endlessly in his mind like a wound that refused to heal. Madison seemed distant too, her guilt written on her face, yet Derek's influence over her was clear. He whispered just enough to keep her loyalty tethered to him, making Ethan feel as though the person he loved most was slipping further away with each passing day. Anger burned hot, but beneath it was a hollow ache that no words could describe. Ethan began to consider every possible way to respond, understanding that simple confrontation would accomplish nothing. He needed a plan, a strategy that would make Derek feel the weight of what he had done without losing himself in the process. Late at night, Ethan replayed every moment of their shared past, tracing the steps Derek had taken to infiltrate his life and realizing how methodical and cruel it had been. The sense of family corruption gnawed at him. Someone who shared his blood had used it as a weapon against him. As he paced the quiet rooms of his home, Ethan's thoughts grew darker and sharper, each one honing a resolve he hadn't known he possessed. He remembered all the sacrifices he had made, the nights he had worked late, the plans for the future, and how easily they had been trampled by Derek's selfishness. Yet, even in the depths of despair, a small ember of determination flickered, growing stronger with each memory of the deceit. He understood that revenge wasn't just about punishment, it was about reclaiming control, restoring some semblance of justice in a life that had been torn apart. Alone in the silence, Ethan allowed himself to feel the full scope of his pain, letting it fuel a careful, deliberate resolve. In the emptiness of isolation, the heartbreak and betrayal transformed into a focus, a determination to confront the wrongs done to him on his own terms. Ethan realized that to turn the tables, he had to be patient and deliberate. He began observing Derek closely, noting the patterns in his behavior. Derek's arrogance was glaring. He always assumed people would believe his words without question. His overconfidence made him careless, and his greed pushed him to make risky decisions that could be used against him. Ethan started keeping track of these weaknesses, quietly gathering evidence of Derek's errors, from financial missteps to small lies he told other family members to appear superior. He documented everything, making sure no detail was overlooked. While Derek strutted through life thinking he was untouchable, Ethan maintained an outward calm, never revealing how much he knew or how far ahead he was thinking. He would smile politely, respond casually to Derek's jabs, and act as if nothing had changed, all while slowly setting the pieces in motion. Each small maneuver was carefully calculated to expose Derek in a way that would leave no room for excuses, but without alerting him to the plan. The more Ethan observed, the more his resolve solidified. He realized that revenge wasn't about impulsive anger. It was about strategy, about letting Derek's own flaws become the instruments of his downfall. With every interaction, Ethan tested Derek's overconfidence, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal the consequences. Meanwhile, the tension inside Ethan grew, not out of fear but from anticipation. He felt a steady pulse of determination, a sense that justice could finally be achieved if he remained patient and vigilant. Every day added to his understanding of Derek's vulnerabilities, and every small success in his subtle exposures strengthened Ethan's confidence. He felt like a quiet storm building, knowing that when the right moment arrived, Derek's arrogance and greed would collide with the careful, relentless planning Ethan had put in place. The calm exterior hid a mind entirely focused, and the emotional energy of betrayal had transformed into a sharpened determination to reclaim what had been taken. Ethan's patience began to pay off as Derek's carefully constructed facade started to crumble. Small whispers and questions spread among family and friends, seeded by Ethan's subtle revelations, and suddenly Derek's charm no longer protected him. People who once admired him began to doubt his intentions, noticing inconsistencies and half-truths they had previously overlooked. Derek's schemes, which had once seemed foolproof, started unraveling on their own. Financial mistakes, careless exaggerations, and his manipulations of relatives and acquaintances surfaced at just the right moments, creating tension and confusion around him. Each slip Derek made reinforced the doubts Ethan had planted, and the chaos began to infiltrate Derek's own daily life. Madison, who had once felt trapped by his influence, started to see through the illusion. She realized how much she had been swayed, how much Derek had taken advantage of her emotions, and guilt mixed with relief filled her heart. Watching Derek stumble, Ethan felt a cautious satisfaction he hadn't experienced since discovering the betrayal. The sense of justice was subtle but undeniable. The arrogance that had once made Derek untouchable was now his undoing, and Ethan observed it quietly, knowing he had orchestrated the environment that allowed it to happen. With each conversation that revealed Derek's dishonesty, each encounter where his lies were exposed, Ethan felt the weight of betrayal lift slightly, replaced with the steady glow of vindication. For the first time in months, he saw the possibility of reclaiming normalcy, of restoring balance to the life that had been disrupted. The tension that had once filled every interaction with Derek began to shift, replaced with the quiet knowledge that justice was no longer a distant hope. It was unfolding right before. Madison, seeing Derek for who he truly was, began to reconnect with Ethan emotionally, acknowledging the deception that had kept her in line, and Ethan felt a glimmer of the trust they once shared starting to return. It was not a complete resolution, but the first signs of fairness and accountability were finally visible, and Ethan could sense that the hard work, patience, and careful planning were beginning to bear fruit. The moment Ethan had been preparing for finally arrived. He asked Derek to meet him alone, away from prying eyes, in a quiet part of the house where no one could interrupt. The tension was thick, almost suffocating, as Ethan stared directly at the man who had caused so much pain. Derek's usual smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty he hadn't shown before. Ethan spoke steadily, recounting the ways Derek had deceived, manipulated, and hurt both him and Madison, laying out evidence with calm precision. With each revelation, Derek's confidence weakened. The arrogance that had once made him untouchable began to collapse under the weight of truth. For the first time, he looked vulnerable, aware that Ethan had anticipated his moves and outmaneuvered him at every turn. Madison entered quietly afterward, her eyes filled with regret. She approached Ethan and admitted how she had been swayed, acknowledging the mistakes she had made and the influence Derek had wielded over her. Her words, though sincere, were tinged with sorrow for the pain her actions had caused. Ethan listened, his heart heavy, yet a strange sense of relief washed over him. The confrontation didn't erase the past, but it allowed him to express the anger and betrayal he had carried for so long. As Derek left, defeated and stripped of the illusions that had sustained him, Ethan felt a mixture of vindication and lingering sadness. He had achieved justice in a way that required patience and strategy rather than violence or rage, but the scars remained. Betrayal, he realized, leaves marks that do not fade quickly. They shape the way one trusts, loves, and moves forward. Still, standing there with Madison by his side, Ethan felt a cautious sense of closure. The storm had passed, the immediate threat removed, and though the emotional wounds were deep, he had reclaimed his power and regained a measure of control over his life. It was a painful lesson in loyalty, deception, and the strength required to face those who hurt you most, and Ethan knew the memory of this confrontation would stay with him forever. After the storm passed, Ethan focused on rebuilding his life, piece by piece. He approached each day with renewed caution, learning to recognize red flags and to set boundaries that protected him from future harm. Decisions that once seemed simple now came with clearer judgment, shaped by the harsh lessons he had endured. Derek, once confident and untouchable, faced the fallout of his actions. His relationships with family crumbled, leaving him isolated and distrusted. Professionally, his reckless behavior and exposed manipulations damaged his reputation, and he struggled to regain footing in a life he had once controlled with ease. Meanwhile, Madison and Ethan began the slow process of reconnecting. Conversations that had once been strained turned into honest discussions, where past mistakes were acknowledged and the truth faced without avoidance. Trust was tentative, but with patience it began to grow again, strengthened by shared commitment and a recognition of the pain they had both endured. Together, they rebuilt routines, learned to communicate more openly, and supported one another in reclaiming the life that had been nearly destroyed. Ethan reflected often, thinking about the betrayal, the heartbreak, and the patience it had taken to navigate the situation without losing himself entirely. Every experience had left a mark, but it had also taught him resilience, the importance of vigilance, and the power of measured response. As he looked at Madison, seeing the renewed connection and hope between them, Ethan felt a quiet sense of triumph, not in revenge for its own sake, but in having preserved his integrity and reclaimed his life. The memories of Derek's betrayal remained, a reminder of how quickly trust can be shattered, but also of the strength required to recover. Standing there, Ethan realized that although he had lost his brother and nearly lost his marriage, he had not lost himself, and that, he knew, was the revenge he never expected to need. Do you think I handled it right by standing up to my brother and rebuilding my life, or should I have tried forgiving them? Share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe and hit the bell for more stories like this.